My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 35 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life quietly begins to come apart is that it doesn't sound like a disaster when it starts. There's no thunder, no screaming, no dramatic crash that tells you this is it. This is the moment everything changes. Sometimes it starts with a single sentence, a sentence spoken so calmly, so evenly, that for a few seconds your mind refuses to process what your ears just heard. 3 days ago, I had a man I thought I was going to marry. Or at least, I had built my future around him so completely that I didn't know where he ended and my plans began. His name was Daniel Hayes. We had been together for 2.5 years. Long enough to build routines that felt permanent. Long enough to argue about paint colors for a house we hadn't bought yet. Long enough to have a joint savings account with numbers that meant something real. $45,000. That's what we had set aside. Not for vacations. Not for luxury. For something that mattered. For a child. I'm a middle school special education teacher. I've been doing this for 11 years. I work with kids most systems quietly give up on. Learning disabilities, behavioral challenges, emotional trauma. The ones who fall through cracks that are bigger than anyone wants to admit. I make $56,000 a year, which is not a lot of money for someone trying to adopt a child. And I knew that. I knew every number, every timeline, every hoop I would have to jump through. Because I had been researching adoption since I was 28. I didn't want a child in the abstract. I wanted to be the person I never had. Because I grew up in foster care. I entered the system at 7 years old. I bounced between 4 homes before I landed somewhere that finally felt steady. I was 11. They didn't adopt me. They were older, already had grown kids. The legal process felt overwhelming. But they kept me. They showed up. They came to my high school graduation, my college graduation. They still call me every year on my birthday. They are good people. But I was never legally anyone's daughter. I aged out of the system at 18 with a garbage bag of clothes, a GED study guide, and a quiet, bone-deep understanding of what it feels like to be a child nobody chose. That feeling doesn't leave you. It settles somewhere under your ribs and stays there. And that's why I teach the kids I teach. And that's why I wanted to adopt. When Daniel and I first talked about children, early in our relationship, he said he was open to it. I didn't push. I didn't try to convince him. I just told him the truth, that this wasn't optional for me, that I needed a partner who genuinely wanted this life. He looked at me, steady, reassuring, and said he admired what I was doing. He said he couldn't imagine a better mother. I believed him. God, I wanted to believe him. We started the adoption process 8 months ago. Domestic infant adoption through a licensed private agency. I was the primary applicant. He was listed as my partner. My co-parent. We did everything together. The home study, the interviews, the training, about 30 hours total. Parenting education, attachment theory, trauma-informed care. We filled out financial disclosures, health assessments, personal references. I gave my fingerprints for the background check. He gave his. It was slow. The agency warned us. Approval would take 4 to 6 months. After that, the wait for a match could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. We were patient. We were prepared. We were aligned. Or at least I thought we were. About 2 weeks ago, something shifted. Subtle. Easy to explain away. He was quieter. More distant. On his phone more often. Less interested when I talked about the adoption. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I told myself it was stress. This process is stressful. I didn't push. I didn't want to turn anxiety into conflict. Then, 8 months in, 3 weeks before our expected approval decision, he sat down across from me at the kitchen table. I was grading papers, red pen in hand, the kind of ordinary moment that should have stayed ordinary. He said, I need to tell you something, and you're going to be upset. I put my pen down. Something in my chest tightened. Okay, I said. He exhaled. I called the agency last week. I blinked. Okay. I told them, you have a criminal record. For a second, I thought I misheard him. I don't have a criminal record, I said. I know. The world didn't shatter. There was no dramatic moment. Just silence. Heavy, pressing. Then I asked the only question that made sense. Why would you say that? He didn't hesitate. Because he'd already made the decision. Because I don't want to do this anymore, he said. I don't want kids. Something inside me went still. Not broken. Not yet. Just still. I thought I could get on board with it for you, he continued. But I can't. And the longer this went on, the more trapped I felt. Trapped. That word landed harder than anything else. So you lied, I said slowly. To a licensed agency. I just made a phone call. You fabricated a criminal charge. I said you had a misdemeanor assault from college. I figured it would flag the file. stall things. That's fraud. It's not fraud. It is when you interfere with a legal process by lying. He shook his head, frustrated now. You were so focused on this, Olivia, I couldn't breathe. You could have told me you didn't want kids. You would have left me. I held his gaze. Yes, I said. And instead you tried to destroy something you knew mattered to me. I looked at him then. Really looked. At the man who sat through 30 hours of training about caring for traumatized children. Who held my hand during the home study when I talked about my past. Who watched me cry over a life I never got to have and told me I would be an amazing mother. And then called the agency to make sure I never became one. That's fraud, I said again, quieter this time. And I'm going to fix it. His expression changed. What does that mean? It means I'm calling them in the morning. His jaw tightened. If you do that, we're done. I didn't even hesitate. We're already done. He slept in the guest room that night. I didn't sleep at all. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold 3 times, staring at the adoption binder we had built together. 8 months of paperwork, reference letters, training certificates, photos we had carefully chosen for our profile. 8 months of my life, organized in color-coded tabs. At 8 a.m., I picked up my phone and called the agency. The phone call with the agency was one of the hardest conversations I have ever had. And I say that as a woman who has spent 11 years talking to children in crisis. Children removed from homes. Children who flinch when adults raise their voices. Children who have already learned, far too early, that the people who are supposed to protect them sometimes don't. So when I say it was hard, I mean it sat in my chest like a stone for the rest of the day. I asked to speak to our assigned caseworker. When she came on the line, I introduced myself, gave my case number, and told her I needed to report false information that had been submitted regarding my application. Her tone changed immediately. Professional. Careful. I explained everything. That my boyfriend, who was listed on the application as my partner and co-parent, had contacted the agency and falsely claimed I had a criminal record. That he had specifically fabricated a misdemeanor assault charge from college. That none of it was true. That my background check had already been completed months ago and came back clean, exactly as I knew it would. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before saying, "We did receive a concerning communication connected to your file." She would not tell me every detail of what Daniel had said, but she confirmed enough. The file had been flagged. It was under review. There would be a delay. I closed my eyes and leaned against the steering wheel in the school parking lot, my keys still in the ignition, the engine off, my breath too shallow. I asked, "What do I need to do to clear it?" She told me the agency already had my clean background check on file, which helped. But because the allegation had come from someone listed as my co-parent, they had to investigate. Policy. Documentation. Procedure. The slow machinery of institutions trying to be careful. Then I gave her the second part. The part that made it all real. I told her Daniel and I were no longer together, and that I wanted to continue the adoption process as a single applicant. She paused. A longer pause this time. Then she said gently, "You understand that changing from a couple application to a single applicant file will require portions of the process to be restarted." I understand. You'll need a new home study, a new financial assessment based on a single income household. Your profile materials will need to be updated. I understand. Another pause. Then, quieter. Single applicants can face additional scrutiny. The wait may be longer. Are you sure you want to proceed? There are moments in your life when the truth comes out of you without effort. No polish. No speech. Just the thing at the center of you, standing there without protection. So I said, I entered foster care at 7. I aged out at 18, carrying my things in a garbage bag. I have wanted to give a child a home since I was barely old enough to understand what that word meant. Yes, I want to proceed. The line went silent again. Not awkward. Just human. Then she said she would send the updated paperwork and that they would begin the transition to a single applicant file. And then she told me something else. Something that mattered. She said the false allegation from my ex-boyfriend would be documented in the file. That the agency took that kind of interference seriously. That false statements could damage applicants, delay placements, and compromise the integrity of a process designed to protect children. I asked her what seriously meant. She said the agency would likely file a formal complaint with the state licensing authorities because knowingly making false statements to a licensed adoption agency could qualify as fraud or interference with child placement proceedings. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car staring through the windshield at the school building for 10 full minutes before I went inside and taught 4 periods like it was a normal Tuesday. It was not a normal Tuesday. But 7th graders do not care that your personal life is collapsing if they need help with fractions or paragraph structure. So I showed up. I redirected behavior. I helped one student sound out words he insisted were stupid. I reminded another girl that slamming her Chromebook shut did not, in fact, solve algebra. I kept moving. Because sometimes the only way through humiliation is routine. Daniel moved out over the next few days. Technically, he had already left the night I ended it. He stayed with his parents, then came back while I was at work with his mother and an SUV to collect his things. When I got home, the apartment looked wrong in that eerie, too clean way spaces do after someone removes themselves from them. His shoes were gone from the door. His chargers were gone from the kitchen counter. His half of the closet stood open like a pulled tooth. He left his key on the counter. And beside it, a note. One sentence. Of course it was one sentence. That was apparently how men like Daniel like to do damage. It said, "You're choosing a hypothetical child over a real relationship. I hope it's worth it." I read it twice. Then a third time, because sometimes cruelty is so shallow it almost confuses you. Hypothetical child. As if a child not yet placed somehow mattered less. As if the thousands of children waiting to be chosen were theoretical. As if my entire life had not been shaped by what happens when adults decide a child is too inconvenient, too abstract, too much responsibility to love on purpose. I dropped the note into the recycling bin. Then I wiped down the counter. Not because it was dirty, because I needed my hands to do something. A week later, his mother called. Her name was Susan, retired dental hygienist, impeccable hair, the kind of woman who wore moral certainty like expensive perfume. She didn't waste time with greetings. "I think you need to reconsider what you're doing." I stood in my classroom during planning period, staring at the cinder block wall while her voice sliced through the phone. "Which part?" I asked. "All of it. The breakup, the adoption, this whole ridiculous escalation." I laughed then, not because anything was funny, because when someone is that committed to minimizing what has happened, laughter is sometimes the only response your body can manage before anger. "Your son lied to a licensed adoption agency," I said. "He panicked. He fabricated a criminal record. He made a phone call. He made a false statement during a legal process." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Olivia, you are blowing this wildly out of proportion." That was the moment I understood something important. Daniel had not become this way in isolation. People do not casually rewrite reality unless they were raised believing reality was flexible whenever it became inconvenient. I lowered my voice. "No, Susan. I'm responding proportionally to the fact that your son chose deception over honesty because he thought sabotaging my future was easier than admitting he didn't want the same life." She went quiet for half a beat, then pivoted. "It would have been impressive if it weren't so ugly. This adoption as a single woman," she said. "Do you know how that looks?" I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it, then put it back. "How it looks?" "Yes, be realistic. A child needs stability. A child needs a mother and a father." I said, "A child needs someone who stays." That silenced her. "Only for a second." Then she said coldly, "You're being naive." No, Daniel was naive if he thought he could lie about me and still remain in my life. She hung up on me. I stood there for a minute. After the call ended, my pulse pounding. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzing faintly, the smell of dry erase marker and old textbooks grounding me in a room where things still made sense. But it still wasn't over, because 3 days after that call, the agency emailed me, and when I saw the sender's name, my stomach dropped before I even opened it. Daniel had contacted them again. This time, he did not claim I had a criminal record. He had changed tactics. According to the email, he had reached out expressing concerns about my emotional stability following the breakup. He told them I was in the middle of a mental health crisis, that I was not in a condition to parent, that he was worried about a child being placed with me in this state. I read the message standing in my kitchen, one hand braced against the same counter where he had confessed, the same counter where he had left his note. And for a second, something hot and ugly rose in me so fast I had to put my phone down before I threw it. Not because I was unstable, because I was furious. There is a particular kind of violence in watching someone who betrayed you try to weaponize your pain as proof that you are unfit. He had lied to the agency, destroyed the relationship, forced me to restart the process alone, and then tried to use my understandable distress about that betrayal as evidence against me. It was so calculated that for the first time, I stopped calling it panic in my head. Panic is messy. This was strategy. I forwarded the email to my caseworker immediately. Then I called a lawyer, family law attorney. Recommendation from a colleague whose sister had gone through a custody battle ugly enough to make most people lose faith in humanity. $250 for the consultation. I paid it without hesitation. I explained the full situation. The initial false criminal allegation. The second claim about emotional instability. The timing. The breakup. The pending adoption. The attorney listened, took notes, and then said two things that mattered. First, that repeated false or misleading statements to a licensed adoption agency could support a cease and desist, and depending on continued behavior, potentially a restraining order. Second, that the agency itself might act independently because organizations like this protect their processes aggressively. Their credibility depends on it. Their license depends on it. Their entire ability to place children safely depends on people not being allowed to interfere with lies. He recommended starting with a cease and desist letter. $400 to draft it. I authorized it immediately. By the time legal fees were done, I had spent $650. $650 on a teacher's salary to send a formal letter telling the man who once said he loved me to stop lying to the people deciding whether I was worthy of becoming a mother. Sit with that. Because I had to. I had to sit with the absurdity of paying money I had carefully saved for a child's future just to protect the possibility of that future from a man determined to contaminate it. The letter went out within 5 business days. It stated clearly that any further contact with the adoption agency concerning my application would be considered harassment and interference with a legal process. That continued conduct could result in further legal action. That all additional incidents would be documented. After that, silence. No new calls. No new allegations. No dramatic apology. Just silence. And somehow that silence felt heavier than noise. Because by then, the apartment had settled into its new shape. 1 toothbrush instead of 2. 1 coffee mug in the sink. 1 side of the bed permanently untouched. The second bedroom still empty. The binder still on the table. My name alone on the paperwork now. At night, I would sit on the couch with the updated forms in my lap and feel 2 things at once. Grief and relief. Grief for the relationship I thought I had. Relief that the mask had slipped before a child was brought into the middle of it. Because that was the part I kept coming back to. What if he had waited? What if we had been approved as a couple? What if a baby had been placed with us, and then he decided he felt trapped? What if his version of fear had become some child's first lesson in abandonment? That thought chilled me more than the breakup ever did. By the end of that month, I stopped wishing he had been honest sooner, because that wish was pointless. Instead, I started doing something else. I started building a life that did not require his agreement. I filled out the updated forms, gathered new financial records, prepared for the new home study, answered every agency email within hours, moved through each task with the grim, precise focus of someone who has already lost enough and is no longer interested in losing anything else. He had wanted to stall the process. Instead, he had clarified it. He had wanted to make me doubt myself. Instead, he had forced me to become unmistakably certain. And somewhere under the exhaustion, under the paperwork, under the legal invoices, and the ache of sleeping alone, something steadier began to form. Not optimism. Not yet. Something harder. Resolve. 6 months is a strange amount of time. Long enough for your life to look different, but not long enough for the memory of how it used to feel to disappear. After the cease and desist letter was sent, Daniel stopped contacting the agency. No more calls. No more emails. No more attempts to rewrite my life in a way that made me look unfit to live it. I don't know if it was the letter that scared him, or if someone at the law firm where he worked finally told him to stop before he made things worse for himself. Either way, the result was silence. And for the first time in weeks, that silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like space. The agency resumed my application. As a single applicant, that distinction followed me through every step that came next. Every email, every form, every conversation. The new home study was scheduled 3 weeks after the restart. This time it was just me. No shared answers. No one else's voice filling in the pauses. No one sitting beside me pretending to want the same future. Just me and the truth. The social worker arrived on a Thursday afternoon. She stepped into my apartment with a polite smile, a clipboard, and the kind of calm presence that made you feel like she had seen everything before, and probably had. We walked through the space together. 2-bedroom apartment. Modest. Clean. Organized. The second bedroom still empty. She paused at the doorway. "Have you thought about how you'll set this up?" she asked. I leaned against the frame, looking into the empty space. "Yes," I said. "I just don't know for who yet." She nodded. Didn't press. Just made a note. We sat at the kitchen table after that, the same table where Daniel had confessed, the same place where everything had split open. And for a second, I wondered if she could feel it, if the room still carried the echo of that moment. But if she did, she didn't show it. She asked about my support system, my job, my schedule, my finances. And then she asked about the breakup. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it either. I told her exactly what happened. The false claim, the second attempt, the legal letter, the silence. She listened carefully. No judgment, just attention. Then she asked a question I will never forget. What makes you think you can do this alone? There are questions that test your qualifications. And then there are questions that test your truth. This was the second kind. I didn't rush to answer. I let the silence sit for a second. Then I said, I was raised alone. She didn't interrupt. So I continued. Not because no one tried, but because the system is imperfect. And sometimes kids fall through it. I swallowed. I fell through. The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt factual. I landed okay, I added, but I know what falling feels like, and I know that one consistent person could have changed everything. I met her eyes. I want to be that person. I don't need a partner to do that. I just need to show up. She wrote something down, nodded once, and moved on. But something in the room shifted after that. Subtle, quiet, but real. The financial assessment came next, and that part was harder on paper than it felt in real life. Single income, $56,000 a year. A 2-bedroom apartment. Not exactly the profile agencies get excited about, but I had prepared for this. For years, I showed them everything. The spreadsheets, the savings, $18,000 in a dedicated adoption fund. Every line item accounted for, every expense tracked, every contingency considered. The social worker actually smiled at one point. You like organization, she said. I let out a small breath of laughter. I like not leaving things to chance. She wrote that down too. The process moved forward slowly. Background check, reconfirmed clean. References, resubmitted. My former foster parents wrote new letters. So did my principal. 2 colleagues, my best friend from college, people who had seen me at my worst, and still trusted me with something this important. The training hours from the couple application carried over, which felt like a small mercy. 30 hours of learning how to care for children who had already learned too much about instability. 30 hours that Daniel had sat through with me. 30 hours that, in hindsight, felt like watching someone rehearse a role they never intended to play. 4 months after the restart, on a Thursday afternoon in March, I got the call. I was in my classroom, after school, sitting beside a student who was struggling through a reading comprehension worksheet. He was frustrated, tired, convinced he couldn't do it. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down, saw the agency's number, and for a second, everything else disappeared. I looked at him. Give me 1 minute, I said. He shrugged, already half focused on the next question. I stepped into the hallway, closed the classroom door behind me, answered the call. Hi, Olivia, my caseworker said. Her voice sounded different. Lighter. And I knew, before she even said it. Congratulations, she continued. Your application has been approved. You are officially in the waiting pool. I leaned back against the hallway wall, the kind of institutional beige wall that has witnessed 1,000 small, invisible moments. And suddenly, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, because all the words I had been carrying for months collapsed into something simpler. Relief. A 7th grader walked past me, glanced up. Miss Carter, you okay? I let out a shaky breath. Yeah, I said, I'm great. My voice cracked on the last word. He stared at me for half a second like I had just malfunctioned, then kept walking. 7th graders have no patience for adult emotions, which honestly is grounding. I went back into the classroom, sat down beside my student. He looked up. Can we finish this? He asked. And just like that, life continued. Yes, I said, let's finish it. We worked through the last few questions together. Main idea versus supporting details. He got 3 out of 4 right. We high-fived. Normal Thursday. But behind that normal moment, everything had changed. Around that same time, the part of the story I hadn't controlled kept moving too. About 2 months after the cease and desist letter was sent, the agency filed a formal complaint against Daniel. I didn't initiate it. I didn't request it. I didn't even know exactly when it happened. But I found out, through my lawyer, as a courtesy notification. The complaint outlined everything. The fabricated criminal record claim. The second call about my emotional instability. The timing. The interference. The pattern. The state licensing board investigated. They reviewed the agency's documentation, the call logs, the notes, the context, and they came to a conclusion. False statements had been made to a licensed adoption agency during an active proceeding. There are consequences for that. Not dramatic ones, not immediate, but real. A formal finding was issued against him. His name is now flagged within the state's adoption and foster care system. If he ever tries to apply to adopt, to foster, to be involved in child advocacy, that record will follow him. It doesn't automatically disqualify him, but it means every future application comes with scrutiny, with questions. with context he cannot erase. And then, the part that reached into his professional life. Daniel is a certified paralegal. That certification comes with ethical standards. Standards that include not making false statements in legal or quasi-legal processes. Adoption applications fall into that category. The licensing board forwarded their findings to the certification authority. A review was opened. I don't know the outcome. It's still pending, but the range is clear. A formal reprimand or suspension, possibly worse. I didn't report him. I didn't contact his employer. I didn't try to ruin his career. I just told the truth to the people who needed to hear it. And the system did what it was designed to do. Slowly, quietly, without spectacle. About a month ago, Susan called me again. His mother. But this time, her voice was different. No sharp edges. No superiority. Just something softer. Uncertain. Did you know about the certification review? She asked. I found out after it was filed, I said. A pause. Then, almost quietly, can you stop it? I leaned against my kitchen counter. The same one. Always the same one. No, I said. I didn't start it. Another pause. Longer this time. He could lose his career, she said. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them. He could have told me he didn't want kids. Silence. And then, so quietly I almost missed it. She should have. That was it. No apology. No defense. No attempt to rewrite what happened. Just acknowledgement. Small. Incomplete. But real. That was the last time anyone from his family contacted me. Now, I'm in the waiting pool. My profile is active. Somewhere, maybe right now, someone is looking at it. A birth mother. An agency worker. A file being passed from one desk to another. A decision forming. I rebuilt everything. The profile book. The photos. The story. This time it's just me. My classroom. My apartment. My life. My former foster parents drove 2 hours just to be part of the new home study. To sit in my living room and tell a stranger what kind of person I am. That mattered more than anything Daniel ever said. The wait could be months. It could be over a year. Single applicants wait longer. I know the statistics. I know the reality. I know that some people will skip past my profile because there isn't a partner standing next to me in the photos. I've made peace with that. Because I'm here. I'm approved. I'm ready. And my file tells the truth. That someone tried to interfere. That the interference was investigated. And that I was cleared anyway. Every morning, I walk past the second bedroom. Still empty. Still waiting. And I think about a 7-year-old girl sitting in the back seat of a social worker's car, holding a garbage bag, trying to pretend she wasn't scared. And I think, whoever you are, wherever you are, I'm coming. 6 months ago, that room felt like a plan. Now, it feels like a promise. There's something strange about waiting. People think waiting is passive. Like you're just sitting still, watching time move past you. But it's not. Waiting, when it matters, is active. It's waking up every day and choosing not to give up on something that hasn't happened yet. It's believing in someone you haven't met. I don't know who my child will be. I don't know their name, their age, their story. I don't know if they'll come to me as an infant wrapped in hospital blankets or a 5-year-old who already knows how to pack their life into a bag. I don't know if they'll like dinosaurs or trucks or books about space. I don't know if they'll trust me right away. They probably won't. And that's okay, because I don't need them to trust me immediately. I just need to be there long enough to earn it. That's the part people don't always understand about adoption. It's not about saving a child. It's about showing up consistently enough that they don't have to save themselves anymore. The second bedroom is still empty. I've stood in the doorway more times than I can count. Sometimes in the morning, coffee in hand. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment is too quiet and my thoughts get louder than I'd like. I've imagined it 100 different ways. A crib in the corner. Or a twin bed with mismatched sheets. A bookshelf. A nightlight. Small shoes by the door. Drawings taped to the wall. Evidence of a life unfolding where there used to be nothing. I haven't rushed to fill it. Not because I'm afraid. Because I want to get it right. Because whoever walks into that room for the first time deserves to feel like it was always meant for them. Sometimes I think about Daniel. Not in the way people assume. Not with longing. Not with regret. Just clarity. He said I was choosing a hypothetical child over a real relationship. But the truth is, I was choosing a real future over a relationship that turned out to be conditional. He didn't want children. That's not the betrayal. People are allowed to change their minds. People are allowed to realize they want a different life. The betrayal was how he handled it. The lie. The manipulation. The attempt to take something from me because he didn't want it for himself. And the second attempt, that one stayed with me longer. The idea that he would look at my pain, the completely reasonable human reaction to losing both a relationship and a shared future, and try to present it as evidence that I was unfit. But here's the thing he didn't understand. Pain is not instability. Grief is not weakness. And anger, when it's rooted in truth, is not something to be ashamed of. If anything, those emotions proved something. They proved I cared. They proved I understood what was at stake. They proved I wasn't going to treat this like something optional. The system saw that. Not perfectly, not instantly, but eventually, correctly. That's the part I come back to. The system worked, slowly, with paperwork and policies and delays that felt unbearable in the moment. But it worked. It saw through the interference. It documented it. It held it accountable. And it moved forward. There's no dramatic ending to that part of the story. No courtroom scene. No confrontation where everything is said out loud and resolved in a way that feels satisfying. Just consequences. Quiet ones. The kind that follow you into job reviews, into applications, into future conversations where someone pauses and asks questions you can't avoid. I don't know what will happen with his certification. I don't check. I don't ask. Because that part of the story doesn't belong to me anymore. What belongs to me is this. A 2-bedroom apartment, a stable job, a carefully built savings account, a stack of paperwork that says I'm ready, and an empty room that won't stay empty forever. Every morning I walk past it, and every morning I feel the same thing. Not impatience, not doubt, expectation. Because somewhere, there is a child who doesn't know me yet, who has no idea that there is a woman walking past an empty room every day thinking about them, planning for them, waiting. And one day, that child won't be hypothetical anymore. They'll be real. They'll be standing in that doorway, looking around, trying to figure out if this place, this person, is permanent. And when that moment comes, I won't need perfect words. I won't need a rehearsed speech. I'll just need to do the one thing I've been preparing to do my entire life. Stay. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 35 years old. I make $56,000 a year as a middle school special education teacher. I have a clean record, an empty bedroom, and more patience than most people would think is reasonable. And I'm going to be someone's mother. Not because I'm extraordinary, not because everything worked out the way it was supposed to, but because I refused to stop when it didn't.